Namaskar. Welcome to Women's Special Express Show. Today we have a guest who is always full of energy. It's very well possible to spot her in a gym with her work laptop or answering phone calls. She is known for her result driven success formulas and hard pondering work style. Being athlete and sports person, her success mantra is talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence win championships. Being single mother, she successfully raised her daughters who are her besties now. She is not only a coach for her girls but also a great mentor in workplace. She is truly people's manager and a great leader who went on to find her own path by establishing enTrilogy Solutions, which is truly a subject matter firm. Let's meet this visionary leader, Tina Huston, on our show today.
Hi, Tina.
My goodness, am I blushing? Hello, how you doing, Pranali? So good to see you.
Good. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful.
How's this lockdown keeping you? What are you doing in this lockdown?
Oh, gosh, probably like everybody else, just trying to stay sane, try to get a little bit of exercise once in a while. I've set up my home office here, which is something I hadn't had a focus on doing, and just trying to get out once in a while and meet people and stay again sane. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing great with the young kid, the office, and it's all the circus all around.
Yes.
The circus, sometimes being master or sometimes being one of the joker in it. Yeah, but it's wonderful.
I'm looking forward to things going back to normal, but I'm not certain they'll be the same normal, right? We'll settle into a new and different, normal, given all of the changes that have had to come as a result of this.
True. So I think everything is going to be a flex model in all the industries now onwards. And especially what you wanted to do, you wanted to travel. That's where, you took up the new responsibility just a couple of years back, and now suddenly all the travels are in your home.
No, gone. I'm home. Yes, exactly. I've become have a first name basis. I'm on a first name basis with the local coffee shop owners and whatnot because I'm there so much. Anyway, yeah.
Wow.
But very different. As you and I were discussing, before the interviews, is it's going to not go back to the same, right? And some of the changes that will be in place is a lot of companies were resistant to having full-time work from home people. Even a lot of times part-time, you work from home only if you had to, for an appointment or whatever the case was. But given now their experience with the efficiencies and the ability of people to have a discipline and work from home, plus really reduce costs. A lot of companies are giving up whole offices and spaces and able to cut costs that way. That is really not going to go back to the same. I think there'll be a lot more acceptance of people either working full-time fully or on at least a part-time basis. And but I, at least for me, I feel like still having interactions with people. I tend to work on projects, right? So it's new people with every project, teams of folks that you've worked with for a long period of time. So there's nothing that really replaces the face-to-face, contact and meeting and greeting people and, hearing about their kids and the kinds of things that you don't discuss, on a 1 hour, video teleconference or something like that. Right. So I'm hoping once this clears, at least, there will be, some more healthy balance between people working from home and people getting together in the office or, meetings or whatever to have that FaceTime. So, but I think, it's going to be hard to put the work from home thing back in the box completely, right? In fact, many companies, I know Oracle, Google, a lot of the tech companies here have basically told people, and I think it's a good policy, right? If you're not going to reopen your office, don't, announce it. Tell people, here's what we're thinking, so they can make their own plans. I know my daughters have friends that basically relocated, to the Bay Area to work for one company or another. And they've been able to go home for the year, right? And, live, they've been able to keep their salaries and live in a place that's a little cheaper or actually, again, spend more time with, their parents or, whatever the case is. So I felt that was a good thing, rather than, keeping people, not knowing month by month by month what's going to happen. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful change in a way. And there are many industries who never looked upon the work from home policies. Now they're looking at and then trying to
Yes.
find out what is the best setup that they can come up with, or where the person interaction is needed. But I totally agree with you. The face to face interaction has a different energy, and that
Right.
shouldn't be lost. Of course, the
Yeah.
flex come up, and it's gonna help most of us, the families, and especially the mothers who are in the workforce. I think they'll be a far great benefit of it.
Right. Right.
So we know that in IT industry, many of us have that kind of luxury. If you want to look upon to your kid for a couple of hours, pick up them, or you can just do that kind of work model at your own pace, own time. But not all the industries, because how they were operating, they were different, and I think
Right.
it's a good that
For
will
the
be
nature of
brought.
the work. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, Tina, we know you for long. I mean, you have given us all the hard time. Well, to viewers, she is my great mentor. She was a VP in my company, and now she's a CEO of enTrilogy. That's where we had to say bye to her. But she has mentored a lot of us, and although not all of us could work with her directly, but she was always there guiding us. She was spotting all the talents. Even somebody is looking at the corner and doing something, she would spot them and find out the right talent and try to convince the managers, where they should be hired upon. Hats off to you. She always had that keen eye on the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is now a good time to slip in my Pranali story? Speaking of talent, so may I tell the story? Okay, all right. So I think it was at a time when we were doing a fair bit of hiring, right? And so we were, gearing up a little bit of a training program for people, coming into the company. What were our policies and procedures? Technologies. Giving demos and making sure that folks that were onboarded, got a good start. So we put that program together. I think we'd run through it a few times. We did it basically on a monthly basis. So any new hire that came in that month, would participate. So I remember the month you were hired. Actually, I think we had a good sized group that time, and we were doing some project manager training. And part of that training was, not just the product, but also how to manage, customer relations, and how to discuss things like feature requests, or that sort of thing. So do you remember we did the role play, right? So we drew you in because our project managers, we geared them up. Actually, we were in fact starting a real project that week. So we had assigned one of the new hires as, to the project management role there. And so we were kind of running through, here's how here's all of our templates and procedures. And, here's, we were going through a project kickoff, I think it was, in fact. So here's how you do a project kickoff. And so we even prepared for it, right? We, amongst ourselves, did role play. We played. Here's what you're going to hear from the customer's project manager, et cetera. And then I remember we brought you in to play the role of the customer project manager. And Oh my God, it was so funny. I definitely feel like you missed your calling. They're your wonderful software developer and technologist. You certainly played that role. All the questions that we had prepared for him, you just stepped right into him, and I think he had a very hard time. You had him on his heels the whole time. It was just so funny to watch. So after that, I told Sean I wanted to steal you, but he wouldn't let me. Anyway,
that's what happened. The other doors were not open, and probably I just didn't knock it. The way you said, you missed the calling, and that's where I feel most of the women in the workforce, they miss the calling. I still remember the way you banged me and, kept pressing that whatever your strengths are, you should be playing the best role there. And I think this is very important. So this is where I would ask you that, many women do miss the calling. Sometimes they feel that they're so not fit for it. They are not trained for it. They are not they will not be able to balance their home for it, and they actually miss their true calling. So I think that's where I would like to have some solutions from you, or some kind of advice for the women, that how to not really miss calling. It's so important. I mean, I still remember that advice that you gave me at that point of time, and I found it so important, that we should be sticking on, we should be taking more ownership, sometimes just driving more where we really want to.
Yeah, and I think, each person individually is different, because you can have something that you're very good at, like, I thought you would be a wonderful project manager. You're very, very clear, very decisive, very, organized, those sorts of skills, come along with that profession. But then that has to be the thing that you like to do as well, because you can be good at something, but not, not enjoy it or not be comfortable, doing it. Certainly that tends to come out, differently than the way you presented yourself, right? Which was very, very professional, but you have to want to be in a certain place. So I think it's more, at least the way I think about it, more not just following your calling and the thing that you're good at, but the thing that you really like or love, because, you spend, 30, 40 years in a career. If you don't like it, or, why be there? Go do something that you love, because life's too short to take, roles or jobs, or, be in a situation that, that doesn't make you happy. So I think that's super important, right? So if your passion is, writing code and software development, and, then you should do that, right? And then, as you advance your career, what kind of advancement are you looking for? So usually in the technical fields, right, there's usually two kinds of paths, right? One is you become more of a subject matter expert, right? You grow your skills, and then you can help, others, on more of a technical advisory kind of basis. And then the other path tends to be, more like people management, right? So, or people or project management, where maybe you retain some of those technical skills, but your role is different. Your role is to make sure the work is getting done, and the deliverables are being met and that sort of thing. But you have, some role in technical guidance, but you're more managing people. So I think, different people, I know people that have been extremely good, technical folks, who then went into the personnel management and either didn't do well at it or hated it, right? And then same way, people that were really good with people that tried, weren't as good technically. So I think it's that sort of intersection of what you're good at and what you really like. And you have to find, each person has to find that, that right spot. Yeah.
So having said that, each person has to find, that's true, but sometimes it's your friend circle, whoever is in your family, sometimes they also keep guiding you that where you are good at, and people start looking into those fields or those areas of themselves that, oh yes, this can be a great area for me to succeed. And having said that, in the workforce, especially being a woman, what I feel is having that mentorship at a workforce is very important. Very few who get it, very few who can convert their friends to the mentors at a workplace. So what is your take on it? I have seen you guiding every individual in your team through your heart, rather than, just being the very much result oriented at a work. But you have always, been keen on doing that. I'm sure you have had a great mentors in your workforce, and you found your friends to be your mentors. So how, what kind of things that you would like to mention here for the women's in the workforce, especially?
Yeah, and I think at least like the mentorship especially is much more important early in your career, right? So when you're just starting in the workforce and just, figuring how to navigate things, or, school doesn't teach you everything, what are the real, practical aspects of, of being in the workforce and being a valued employee in whatever the industry or the sector is. But from a mentorship perspective, I think about it like, like relationships, right? No two people ever have the same relationship, right? So finding a mentor that fits for you, is important, right? And that person can be a friend, it can be, your boss, it can be somebody else's boss, it could be, somebody else. And I think, everybody likes to, at least most people that I've known, like to play that role. They like to help other people. Something about, finding somebody that you admire for whatever reason you admire them, that you can speak to very frankly and clearly, and who speaks to you frankly and clearly. Those are the best mentors to seek out, and honestly asking them, hey, here's will you be my mentor? Here's the areas that I feel like that I could use improvement on. What do you think? Right. So actively engaging them in that role, and then people will accept that role. But I think also mentors, it's not just also, I would say, finding people that that will support you, but also people that will tell you the things that nobody else will, right? Because we all have blinders in some way, and we don't like to hear it. Maybe we don't like to acknowledge it, or don't see it. So I think having somebody that in a nice way, in a supportive way, can help you see those those things that you don't see in yourself. Those are definitely good mentors. And that feel comfortable telling you. A lot of people, we like to, be nice to people, right? So how is it you can deliver a message, nicely, but also a valued message to that individual in a way that they can maybe, again, see something they didn't see themselves. That's right. So you have to be in the right frame of mind yourself, because that's an important point. It doesn't matter what somebody else tells you. It's like having any other, being an alcoholic or some other behavioral issue. Unless you're ready to change yourself, it doesn't matter what, anybody else says to you. You have to be ready yourself to listen and to make changes. And maybe some of the feedback you agree with, some you don't, but trying to, again, get the honest feedback in a way that it doesn't feel, like it's, criticism. That's important, because that's more likely to be heard, right? We're all human, right?
Yeah. So let's go back to a little bit older journey of your career where you began. Now you are in the IT industry. You have established yourself into the project management and associated fields, where you are doing a lot of work, the customer-centric work on your own right now. But back in the days, you held the engineering degree in the civil sector.
Yeah.
How that happened?
How do I put this? I grew up actually in northern Nevada. Actually, my grandparents raised me. My grandfather was an electrician. He wasn't an electrical engineer, but he was my mentor. More not so from, let's say, a work perspective, but from a life perspective. He was a very, very wholesome, very big-hearted person. For example, my sister and I were getting older. We were, going into high school or whatever. And so, but we still had all of our, little girly things and stuffed animals and that sort of thing. And we came home one day and they were all gone. And he had basically given them to some kids that needed them more, right? He was just that kind of, he would give you the shirt off his back. So he was my mentor in life, and being, respectful and accepting, everybody and whatnot. So he was an electrical engineer, and even though he was never educated, actually immigrated from Scotland. He wasn't born here. He immigrated from Scotland, so never had born at 1900s, right? So there was education at that time. That was the Great Depression. Actually, speaking of COVID, half of his family died with the Spanish influenza. So he ended up raising some of his younger siblings. So anyway. So he was an electrician, and then his family, just kind of engineering minded. One of his, he had 6 kids. My grandmother had 6 kids, and 3 of them ended up engineers or computer scientists. Actually, very early COBOL programming, computer science. My dad himself was a mining engineer, and an uncle that was an electrical engineer. So just engineering minded. So then my dad had 3 girls, and one of us was going to be an engineer. He didn't care which one. And I was the youngest, and the other two went different ways. So I was pretty much it. But I was okay. I did, well in math and sciences in school. And, I don't know, maybe it's something, either a little bit, nature. It's like, I know families that have, everybody in the family is a musician, or everybody in the family is an artist, or, an engineer, or doctor, lawyer, kind of thing. So we tend to, maybe support, or I won't say push, but, even as kids, we look up to our parents and what are they doing, right? And we emulate, right? So, and part of it, I think, is just natural skills in that, in that area. Some of that just, I think, runs in your genes. So that's how I got into engineering. My dad, family of engineers. civil engineering, I'm not really sure why, other than I didn't think I wanted to be an engineer. I was okay at math and, all of that, but I like to build things. So in fact, I took a lot of courses in like construction management, and, I like to build things. I built, furniture and, things like that. I like putting things together. So I did the civil engineering. I worked in that industry, up until we moved up to the Bay Area. So for about the first 8 years of my career. But it's like all of the engineering, forms of engineering all still have some aspect of computer science. We did, the structural courses, for example, modeling, stress in various, structural members of a building, and, pavement design, that sort of, they all had, computer science applications, and mostly modeling, procedural kind of programming. So I did have some, programming in college. Then when we moved up here to the Bay Area, the job that I ended up taking at Lawrence Livermore Lab, it was kind of a combination of basically field installation work as well as system engineering and design, right? Because when you deploy systems, especially the the physical security systems, they involve, things like, your central alarm station. You'll have racks of equipment. There's field, equipment out in the field. They're distributed control systems. So somebody has to do the installation, the pipe, the wire, the conduit, that all has to be laid out. So at that point, it was a little bit of intersection of understanding system engineering and then construction. And then just, as I evolved in my career there, I took on basically all of the, the various systems and some of the, the field maintenance work at the same time. So then I got more into the shift. So that happened pretty early in my career, probably after 9 years. So, it's hard to even remember kind of what that transition looked like, because it was, fairly seamless.
Wow. And then we all know that 16 years in the Eleanor lab, and it was a great career. There you had a very good growth. I'm sure you overperformed. The way
very good growth. Yeah.
Overperformed.
Yeah, and it was a good work environment too. I know one of the topics here was, work-life balance. So it was a good work-life balance location. So it was somewhere I would like it, maybe even almost like working at a college campus. There was a lot of academic type work going on. A lot of very, very smart people, running around on, bicycles because they didn't want to pollute the environment, and, that sort of thing. Right. So it's a good, it's a good work-life balance, because it was a culture that, that appreciated, people. So a lot of good growth there, both personally and from a career perspective. And then, as I mentioned, I think when you and I spoke initially, it was a good community. Livermore, I still consider that, my home. My girls consider it their home. It's embedded there, in a small community, which is, growing like everywhere else in the Bay Area. But it was just a very, very good place to raise kids. My work and the lab actually sponsored a daycare, so I was able to drop my kids off, and the daycare happened to be adjacent to, or connected to, in fact, the K through 5 school. So there was no transition. I didn't have to leave at, noon every day to pick them up and get them, from school to daycare. So it was a supportive culture, for the time when I was raising my family. So yeah, it's a good place.
It's important to have that kind of culture where the supportive stuff comes along, and then whether it's a man or a woman, they always can, grow better, grow happily, I feel.
Right. Yeah, if you take out the stress of, am I going to get a call from my kid because he missed the bus, or, that sort of thing, it was all gone, right? So if you don't have that, added stress, then yeah, certainly you're a better employee and, better parent, really, when you're home with your kids. If, the basic stresses, aren't weighing you down.
Right. But when your daughters were young, I have heard a story from you that you were working for 10 hours. They were like, the older one was just newborn.
Oh, yes.
6 months after that, you had to go back to work. 10 hours was also the temporary hours, somebody said it.
Yes. Yeah, that was actually during the first 8 years, of my career when I worked in the construction industry, and they tend to work very long hours and very early hours, right? They're early, in early 6, 5, 6, 4, 7, very early, early work hours. So I've been there a few years and then had my first daughter, right? And in the construction industry, you have to go where the job is. It's not like an office. Some people do work in the office, granted, but mostly it was project work. You had to be there to build the thing, right? You had to be in the field. So,
Right.
The projects that I worked on, like, UCLA, I worked at UCLA for a year and a half, I think, on a cogeneration plant. A few projects like that, but it was good experience, but long, hard hours, right? Very early hours to, late hours. So especially for the engineering folks, there was obviously craft workers and, they had a normal, 8-hour schedule. They were gone. But, as an engineer working in that industry, you had to do all the planning and preparation, read all the prints, get all the material ordered, answer all the requests for information, work with the engineer to, resolve if there was an architect or whatever, to resolve whatever the issue was. So there was a lot of off hours, work to, make sure the crew when they got in was productive. So, but yeah, so I've been working there, a year and a half. So good employee, right? And
Yeah.
So when I told them I wanted to take some, time off, I was, obviously having my baby, I wanted to take 6 weeks off. So took the 6 weeks off. They offered, actually, which was very nice. I appreciated it. Was to put me in the main office for a year, so I wouldn't have to commute out to a job site. So I actually moved my family really very close to work, right? Because I still had 6-week-old kid, right? So I moved right by the office, a mile away from the office, found a babysitter a mile away from the office, got all settled in, and yeah. So even at that, I was still working 10-hour days. I'd still get into the office by 7, maybe out by 5 or 6 o'clock. In fact, the babysitter, I had to pick up my daughter by 6 o'clock, so I couldn't be any later than 6. And again, these guys are used to working 12-hour days. They worked half day mandatory on Saturday. So one of the comments after a few months of this, 10-hour day business was how long the part-time hours were going to last. So when you put in 10 hours a day and that's a part-time schedule, so, but, I'd been used to it. I'd been, in that industry for a few years. So that wasn't surprising to me, but yeah, that's actually, I ended up taking a couple years off when my daughters were young, because despite, promising I'd be in the office there for a year, they ended up moving me out to a job site where I had an hour and a half commute through downtown Los Angeles either way. And, so baby daycare hours, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Right. So I was mad at myself. Babysitter was mad at me. I'd get there at 6:15 or 6:20. Traffic could be bad, whatever. So that went on for a while. And then finally I said, I need to do something else here. So took a little break, which was good. And those kinds of decisions, you're always resident to take, right? So if I take some time off, is it going to impact my career, my ability to reenter the workforce? And it doesn't. There's, certainly a shortage in the workforce generally of, skilled workers, and you shouldn't be fearful of doing what's right for your family at the time it's right for your family, even if that means taking some time off.
Right.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And during those 2 years, you happen to be a real estate broker for yourself. You were not.
Yeah, that was something I didn't do like as a career move, but I'm it's hard for me to sit still. So I just got that so I could have something to do when I was home with the kids. So at the time, my husband was in construction also, and so we were looking to perhaps buy and fix and sell homes. So that was kind of what I did. Kids are taking a nap, and I would take my real estate exam, or I would be looking for properties or something like that. It was something I could do from home and feel like I was still engaged in using my brain in some way.
Oh, so you never really sat idle. I don't remember a day.
No idle. Yeah.
Now that it's time for you to relax, maybe have a great vacation, or just move around, just to be a backpacker, but you're still working, and still you're working with the same energy force that you were in your 20s. It's sometimes just put us in the bad bucket, Tina. No two people are alike. And like I mentioned to you, if you find something that you really like doing, that really grabs your hook, then you get enjoyment out of that, right? So it doesn't matter whether that's something in your personal life or something in your work life. If that's the thing that makes you happy, then I know it's difficult for sometimes, and this is that kind of work-life balance. You can think of people as being workaholics,
but if I think that's, I don't say not necessarily a negative thing or a positive thing, but if that's the thing that makes the person happy, then then that's a good thing, right? But to that point, you do have to set boundaries, especially if you have a family, right? The boundaries are important, and sometimes they're very difficult to draw. Especially when you have like project work deliveries. It's not a like a customer service job where the job is the same every day. There's jobs where there's ebbs and spikes, and you have to put in extra hours to to make it deliverable. Those are the tough ones, right? Because you do have to perhaps sacrifice one thing or another for some period of time. But again, it can't go on forever. You have to set boundaries for yourself, and boundaries have those clear discussions with your your teams or your supervisor, project manager, whoever the case may be.
Right. So coming back to that point, when you said about when the woman works for longer hours, then she's workaholic or she's overambitious. But at the same time, when the man does the same amount of work, or he wants to prove himself at the work at the similar level and putting out the similar efforts or time, then he is supposed to do that. Have you seen that kind of biased judgment?
Yeah, I think it's gotten better over time, but like the case that I mentioned to you, right, where a woman's working 10 hours a day, it doesn't even matter, it could be man, you're working 10 hours a day, you have to leave to pick up your children, that's looked down upon because everybody else is there for 12 hours, right? That kind of culture, really all it does is is it drives those folks kind of away and out. It breeds a even competition, I would say, between the the employees, or a feeling of that guy or girl isn't putting in their fair share. Well, they've put in their fair share. The fact that you're choosing to put in 30% more is wonderful, but don't then hold it against the other person because they can't, right? So but I see it getting better over time. And again, I think this COVID thing's been interesting, right? Especially for families where maybe mom was the primary, or dad, even, it doesn't matter, was the primary caregiver for the child, and maybe doing some work from home to to make that happen when you're both in the home, and you kind of see the the interaction and the level of distraction that goes on, through the day when you've got, kids, because the kids are home doing Zoom school and they get stuck on a math problem. There's no teacher there, right? You have to, help them through it. Mom, I'm hungry. I need a sandwich. It's just this constant, constant little bit of work, little bit, And so, yeah, I think in situations like that, it's, definitely, naturally more difficult to be 100%, productive. But, the flip side of that is now that you don't have the commute, you can put in, extra time, or you're putting in a little time after you put the kids to bed, that sort of thing. And that's the way you can balance things out. Is in terms of COVID, is both parents are now seeing what each other's role looks like, in a more visible way. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. And probably, again, one of those things back in the box, I think there'll be a lot more, natural tendency to share responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
That should just happen. Now that I see, kind of my overall, situation, my overall family needs, how can I, contribute better? I see, dads or again, moms kind of, shifting in that way.
Yeah. So it's a good change.
It's a good change. Yeah. Sometimes it takes, a dramatic thing like that to really bring about, the kind of change like I think we'll see, after this thing is over, or when it's over.
So, Tina, coming back to your work with the HID, where you were working as a VP of very, very C-suite corners, very few female candidates are there. You were working at a very good ladder, very good position. And one sudden day you decided to drop off everything and start something on your own, maybe at a very small scale level, where you'll be putting double the efforts and not sure about the other results. How did that move happen?
Okay. Again, different times or different things for different times in your life, right? Whether it's, your work life or your personal life. For example, when you're a young kid, you need your parents, you like to be around your parents. When you start to become a teenager, you need your independence, and you start to, migrate toward, friendships of your own. even the rebellious thing when you're in your 20s, and you focus more on school and your education. Maybe your 30s, 20s, 30s are more focused on finding a partner or settling down in life. Most people, like in your 30s and 40s, then you focus a lot of energy on your career, right? Your kids start to get older; they need less sort of daily or hourly attention, and that's the acceleration point of your own career. And then I feel like I was coming out of that phase. My kids, my oldest daughter had already graduated a couple years before in college, and she was settled in and doing really well. My younger daughter had just graduated. So I could have kept going, or even found a different position, or just kept going, working for companies. But I thought, if I'm going to try this on my own, now's a good time to do it. It was a good transition time. Interestingly, my girls both ended up getting jobs in San Francisco. So it's afforded me some time. I don't have to be in anybody's office, or I set my own travel schedule around the project. So I spent a lot more time with them. I would go up literally and spend days at a time with one of them or the other in their apartment. I'm sure they started to feel like I was a third roommate. So it was just the right thing for me at that time of my life, right? So I think it's it was a good change.
It's a good change, but it's ownership, I feel.
Yeah, and then also the chance to, like I did probably get to that point, that sort of workaholic point, where I felt like I hadn't set boundaries for myself. There was nobody going to set boundaries for me, at that level, that I needed a strong break, to really change, my own behavior, right? And that was the only way I could really, see to do it, because it's hard when you're in a situation. I think the best time to make a change in your own behavior is at some sort of transition point in your life. So that break really kind of afforded me, some time to think about that, and, how I would, behave differently, and being in my own control of, my schedule and the projects that I took on, and that sort of thing, kind of afforded me to kind of shift my behavior a little. Yeah.
So looking at what you are working as right now is more of an integrator sort of a role on your own. So we'd like to know more about what the enTrilogy is exactly doing, what kind of solutions that people seek from you, and where you are exactly in a place where we need Tina to pitch it.
Okay. So I mentioned early on, even from a young age, I'm a builder. I like to see, I'm a builder, and I'm a project-oriented person, right? In fact, I don't rest until something's done, right? It has to be done. But I like to build things. I like to solutionize things. My background, at the lab certainly gave me, 20 years in a security organization, embedded in a security organization, where I, pretty well understand what the problems, the challenges are, as well as what the different roles and sort of organizational processes are, if you will. So the projects that I've taken on have been, mostly, in the security space still, and trying to help customers find, the best solution, for them, and actually not just recommending something. You'll find, some of the consulting firms basically either just hands-on work. They'll write requirements documents, or that sort of thing. Other consulting firms really are more body shops. They embed people in an organization to deliver a particular service. But mine is, I'm doing more, I would say, more hands-on work, which is what I like to do. So it's working directly with the customer, helping pick out products, maybe some requirements, some testing, delivering things, working, training, basically seeing a project through, end to end. A few of the projects, actually one of the big ones I've been working on is with Convergent Technologies. They're working on the LAX airport. So going through the whole, aviation, as I think you've worked on, some of the aviation work, right? It's, some of the more complex kind of scenarios in terms of, some of the physical security systems. But projects like that, basically being in the middle of the delivery.
Wow. So you are like there to play a opera.
Yeah, because a little bit of, to deploy a complex solution, right? It does require knowledge of the business, knowledge of the technology, knowledge of the, the processes, and an ability to, get things done, right? And, understand the steps that are required for, for something like that to happen. So that's where I feel like, my skill set is. So it's been good, been very good.
Yeah. Well, very best luck for the your journey and what you are up to right now. I know you never had work less than 10 hours in your whole come on,
Ever.
yeah, what kept you going? But during those hard times where you had the young girls and you were raising both of them single-handedly, how did you manage being a single parent?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. So right around, speaking of transition, right? So when my family first moved here to Livermore, I worked at, the lab, basically the entire time. It was around 17 years. So I was able to raise my family there, right? So it was stable. It was a good work environment. The work was in Livermore. My kids were in Livermore. I was able to, take off and, take them to soccer practice or softball practice, or, actually coached them when they were little. But everything was right there. I didn't have to, worry about, travel or commuting or, anything like that. Actually, it was divorced. My kids were 5 and 8. So I'd say mostly a single mom, some shared responsibility, but I was fortunate enough to have an aunt, who lived with me the entire time up until the girls were in high school when she passed away. So she was my anchor. She was almost like, the stay-home parent, though she worked, she had an early schedule. So she'd be home at 3:00 when the kids got home from school, and, they loved her. She was like grandma. So, she would make them, avocado toast or beans and, whatever their favorite dishes were. She was, really, kind of spoiling them like a grandma, but she was just there. Right. So that made it easier for me. Right. That was an enabler, for me to be able to, worry less about, getting them somewhere. She'd take them to practice and sort of thing. So I think especially if you're a single mom, certainly finding a support circle. Not everybody would be obviously lucky enough to have the situation that I had, but I think surrounding yourself by people that are supportive, that, maybe either families or mothers, in a similar situation, or friends or, distant relatives, that, you have to have a support structure when you're in that situation. It's, otherwise very, very difficult.
So do you think, since you were like single mother at that point, when your kids were very young, that kind of drove you most to, perform best at all the levels?
Yeah, I mean, this is the balancing. It's very difficult to achieve. And I feel like, at least for me, I was better at it when they were little, because you had to be, right? It's not like you could work an extra hour and not have consequences, right? The kids, the kids stuck at school, right? So I think when they're younger, you have no choice, right? You have to, put them first, and you have to, take care of their needs. As they start to get older, and they friends, middle school, high school, they start to drive on their own. Each one of those things is a transition, not just for them, but for you, right? Then you have to constantly evaluate, what am I going to do now with this, with this extra time? And, usually it just happens naturally. Either you take on more work, or, you take up a hobby. Another big transition in life, right? And you have a ways to go for this is when your kids leave for college, right? And just even the silence that comes over the house, right? Especially if once they're, even when one leaves, the dynamic of the family changes, right? Because they're not in the house. Let's say my daughters, were always, by the time they're that age, they're maybe poking at each other a little bit, but it was noise in the house, right? It was some sort of togetherness, and then when they leave, now what do you do, right? So that was a big transition for me too, is when they were both gone. In fact, that's when I left the lab. I went to work at Quantum at that time, because they were both gone at college, and I was home by myself. And at that time I hadn't been really doing any work travel or that sort of thing, or really anything for myself for that whole period. So I thought, okay, I want to do something a little bit more engaging and challenging, and so at least for me, all the and maybe this is kind of the balance piece, the changes or the transitions that I've had, at least in my life, have been centered around where my kids were in their lives, right? So they were, just going to college, and I was home alone, or, after I got them through college, then the financial thing and the stability, that I needed to make sure I had, financially to help them through school. I could take more risks when that was behind me. So I think that's one way. I mean, you can think about balance in terms of being a daily thing, or, on the whole, if you step back, there's a macro version of it as well, right?
Right.
Through the various phases or cycles.
So, I mean, the way you looked at all the empty time, or the way you looked at, whatever transitions you had to gone through, they were very different perspective. I think you looked at. You didn't just sit on, oh my God, now that my daughters are leaving the home, I'm all of a sudden all alone. Rather, you decided to take up something other to keep you engaged and keep you happy. And I know your daughters are a very good friend of yours. So where the secret lies, you were all working, the aunt was taking care of them most of the time, but how did you end up spending that kind of a quality time that they're so good friend of yours?
Yeah, well, I think at that time it was easier. I think I wasn't putting in, the 12-hour days, 14-hour, it was more, 8 to 9, 10-hour days mostly, right? In fact, the lab also offered what they called an alternative work schedule, right? So the stated schedule was you could work basically 80 hours over 9 days, and then have every other Friday off, which I think was a really good, program, for people, because when you have that extra weekday off, it's not like having a day, on the weekend, the businesses, maybe you have to run errands, that sort of thing, you can do during the workday. So I went on that schedule, so that helped. I had, every other Friday off, but they were close enough that even when you had to put in a 9 or 10 hour day, you were 2 minutes from home or 5 minutes from home. So I think, I see a lot of people, that commute a lot, and I know that's out of necessity in terms of, the pricing and housing pricing in the Bay Area, but the closer you can move your family to, to your work, just the amount of extra time you get out of that one thing alone is, could be 2 hours a day, right? So, definitely take a look at the not just the economics of a housing decision, but the daily practical aspects of it. And, that really helped. But I was able, at that stage, it wasn't the work hours. It was a better work-life balance. Like I mentioned, the culture supported that. So it wasn't, I was mostly the one to pick them up from school after, not at 3:00, but, when the daycare closed, I would pick them up. Or I coached softball, both girls, I coached softball. And so during softball season, that would be, 3 days a week, I'd have to leave at 4:00, but that wasn't the whole year round, right? It was, during that particular season, again, a different type of balance, everything comes with, some cycle.
So coming back to your softball coaching to your younger kids, or we know that you were basketball with the boys in your school.
So the baseball. Yes, I played boys baseball. Yeah, that was what you're asking me. Yeah, so this little rural town that I grew up in, and there was no girls' sports. And I actually was, fairly athletic, and I had a hard time sitting still. So sports was a good thing to, burn off energy. But yeah, there was no girls sports, or at least, not in that season. So I went and played boys baseball. So there were about three or four of us in this small town that actually were on the boys baseball teams, which interestingly, they got a softball program in high school. I believe it was my senior year was the first time the school itself started to offer a softball program. And we actually took second in the state of Nevada that year with a first year program. And it was because the girls that were on the team, we've been playing boys baseball since we were 7. So it was good. It was fun.
You had to deal with boys all the time, whether it was a school, whether it was an engineering college, or anywhere. So you never really found that gender difference that comes into the picture, that there is so much hyped about the women's in the workforce, or all those sort of problems that they are talking about. You never had to come into that, or you never faced that kind of a problem?
Yeah, personally, I never faced it. I know it's an issue for many women. I personally never felt like I faced it. Now, actually, when I was at the lab, it was probably about halfway through my time there, maybe at about 8 years or so. There was actually I know it had existed there. It was a class action lawsuit, against the laboratory of the Department of Energy for the unequal pay, right? And the class action lawsuit ended up, winning, and then we each got, every woman got some increment in salary as a result of it. So, I know that people before me, had obviously suffered that. The raise I got wasn't huge, so I wasn't that far from, I would say what my target salary was. But, I guess the way I look at it, Pranali, and I know it's an issue for, many people, and I don't want to downplay that, but I always felt, I mentioned you overpaid, or I felt like if you're getting a reasonable salary, you're loving what you're doing, there's a lot of value to that. And at some point, let's say you're in a situation where, it's either bothering you or it's, you're having, struggles, economically yourself, and, really is, out of balance, then you do need to speak up, right? And this class action lawsuit, like I mentioned, happened because somebody spoke up and others spoke up, and then a correction occurred. So if there is some inequity like that, you really do, lean in and, either speak to your supervisor first. There's always a path, right? So follow the path, speak to your supervisor, you get what's the answer that comes there. Speak with HR, what's the answer that comes there. And, you can put in your best effort to bring about change, but at the end of the day, don't stay a victim, right? If that situation is not treating you well, don't stay a victim, because it puts mental pressure on you, anyway. Go find a place that will treat you and, with the right level of respect and compensate you, fairly for what you're doing. So, nobody likes to be in the situation where, you're feeling unhappy in the workforce for, one reason or another. Either you correct it, or the situation corrects itself. You speak up, you try to get it corrected through whatever the course of action is. But ultimately, if it can't be corrected, then it's time to maybe question what you're doing there.
Right. I think it's a very important point that you raised, that once realizes about that and, going back towards it and trying to put all the efforts from her end. It's so important. That's not happening. I think that's where this whole sort of the movement is talking about, that we have to speak up for ourselves. Nobody is going to speak on your behalf.
Right. That's right. I think of it like a physics problem, Pranali. What is an object at rest will stay at rest unless significant, force or energy is applied. Right. So sometimes to bring about that kind of change, maybe it happens individually because you're the one that's speaking up. But if it's, a broad scale thing, then, who's pushing on the, the rock to make it different. And if the rock, isn't moving, then you have to, think about yourself as an individual. So try to sort it out first, sort it out with the collection of, people around you. Maybe they're in a similar situation. But ultimately, you have to, still be accountable for your own career and your own happiness, and making sure you're in the right place that's treating you with, with value and respect.
Yeah, many times I think women doesn't realize that she can speak up. She just have to sit on the table, as the Sheryl Sandberg says. Realize that being in the workforce, it's your duty to do that fair job at workplace, and same way that you have to make sure that you have been treated well. And it's a respect that one should be earning it. And if it is not, then you have all the rights to say no for everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's where, we touched on earlier, perhaps finding a good mentor that you can practice that tough conversation with, right? Be the mirror, that can, be, tremendously valuable, because it is very difficult to do. Very difficult to speak up.
So, Tina, when it came down to all the time your work, we have seen putting all the heart you were working, whether it was your team were putting on the timeline toes or anything, you were always up for them. Whether it's the middle of the night and your team is working, you would stay behind with them, with dinner or no dinner, whatsoever is the situation. Why you never, took that where you could go home and handle your team over the phone and take the status updates? Why you always had to be there as a security guard sometimes, more than a manager or a VP?
Yeah, I don't know, the way I think about it, you can lead from the front or you can lead from the back. And, what kind of leader do you want to be or you need to be? And, I'm a very hands-on person. I care, I care a lot about what I'm doing, and, it's hard for me to leave behind. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you
And
always
actually, one of my favorite movies, have you ever seen Braveheart?
no.
Braveheart. I mentioned my grandfather immigrated from Scotland, right? So it's Braveheart is William Wallace, the story of William Wallace, and he's a hands-on leader, right? So he's riding with the troops, and the opposition, they all have their leaders, on horses sitting back in the trees with binoculars watching their people being killed on the battlefield, and William Wallace led his people into the battlefield, right? He was the first rider. He wasn't hanging out at the back, watching what was going on. And that inspired his people, right? So
Nina's leadership skills comes into the picture, where she's always with the people. And I think that's where you were all popular all the time. You wanted to see people, and people wanted to see you again and again, I think.
Yeah. It was a good group. I loved it. I loved that time. Yeah.
So whenever you hire people, what you really look into them, because not many come with the right frame of subject matter expertise to the particular job roles. But what is that most important thing that you always looked into the people?
Okay. Actually, this is a very easy one, Pranali. So if you think about, people as a whole, we have an attitude, right? We have, what is our attitude? Our attitude is positive or negative or supportive or, maybe some degree of personality, but attitude. And then you have abilities, how your ability to grasp things, your ability to, to learn, to figure things out, to work independently. And then there's skills, and the skills would be the things that you know how to do, right? I know how to, I'm a SQL programmer, I'm a good SQL programmer, I'm a good, whatever the case is, right? So it's rare to find people with, exactly all of those, and very strong in all three. But the skills you can train. If you have people with the right attitude and the right ability, you can train them to do anything. But if you have somebody that doesn't have the right attitude, maybe doesn't fit into the culture, doesn't have the right attitude, you'll never see them as a good employee. They won't be a good fit for you either, usually, right? So if you have to pick two, definitely pick attitude and abilities, because everything else can be trained. So that's the way I look at it.
So you just look for the building blocks that can be built, or the hinge together.
Yes. And maybe for somebody that doesn't even have the exact skill, they've got, sort of a parallel skill in another area, but they're, very intelligent and they've got the right attitude and the right work ethic, and, it's a no-brainer. Those tend to, they'll pick things up. In fact, those are the folks that are usually challenged by doing something new or by learning something.
So yes, I'm definitely enjoying what tips you're giving, what success formulas you're giving out to all of the viewers. But we are towards the end of the show, and I'd like to move on to the rapid fire round. So are you all up for rapid fire?
Oh no, I know how good you are at this.
No,
I know what you did to poor Dan on your first day.
remember that.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, shoot.
Okay. So the next word that comes to your mind when I say outsourcing?
Balance. So I think outsourcing can be a good thing, from a couple perspectives. One, cost, right? If you're outsourcing, can you reduce cost? But also I've seen a phenomenal productivity level when you've got teams, let's say, working in both the US and India, or, because you're able to work on almost a continuous basis, right? My work output for the day could be somebody else's work input, and then I get up in the morning and, what I didn't finish is done. And, so I think that sort of, outsourcing, can be, a great partnership and give a lot of productivity.
The best woman leader you find, who is alive and you would like to follow a lot?
Who's alive? That's a good question. Actually, the person that first comes to my mind is Eleanor Roosevelt, but she's obviously not alive. had a number of quotes of hers that I liked. One was, nobody can make you inferior without your consent.
Wow.
I've always, thought that was a very powerful, so I think Eleanor Roosevelt, actually I was just reading something this morning, Michelle Obama, though I'm actually not really a Democrat, I'm, probably middle of the road or, lean more Republican, but the most educated first lady in the history of our country, right?
Yeah.
So her great-grandparents, I believe, were slaves, basically. And, she grew up in a poor side of Chicago, the South Side, a little rough area. But through that, she managed to get through Princeton and Harvard Law School, and basically became the most well-educated, first lady we've ever had. So I like Michelle Obama, for that. There's a lot of adversity there to overcome. Okay, that's probably all that comes to the top of my head.
Okay. If you had to make a movie on the corporate life, then what the name would be?
Make a movie on the corporate life. Have you ever watched The Office?
Yes.
Have you ever watched a show called The Office? So probably something like The Office 2, maybe. Maybe The Office 2 could focus on, like being here from the Bay Area. Certainly the workforce looks a lot different than what you see in The Office, right? It's very, very diverse, people from, everywhere. So, some funny satire on what it's like to work in a diverse work environment, or maybe now with this COVID stuff, The Office, you're kind of looking at The Office. The Office is home right now. Yeah.
So I know that you have been working into the security system for a long time of your career, and you love just this all type of managing logical or physical security systems, integrate through softwares and everything. But what will you do if you wake up in a world where there is no security system?
Oh, that would be a good place, wouldn't it? I don't know what else to say about that. We put security in place to protect ourselves, from things or, people or, threats. So if we had no need for security, that means we'd be very safe and we'd have no threats. Yeah. So I think that'd be a good world. Very good world.
Complete the sentence. Woman in the work field is ...
Growing exponentially.
That's so, I think I wouldn't have imagined that. Growing exponentially. Oh, people should tap onto it, Before you leave, we want to get your guidance. You have given us guidance throughout this session about many things which were unsaid, unfolded, and you kind of, help us looking at those fronts. They were brilliant sides. Yet we'd like to have one advice question from you. What is the best advice that you would like to give to women in the workforce who want to stay in the workforce and want to do best?
I think find a good fit. Find a good fit for you. Whether, that's at the place you currently are, or it's the place you currently are with, some adjustments or working hard or applying for, promotions, or if it means leaving the company. But you have to find the right fit for you. Culture is very important, in the workforce. I mean, you think about, you spend, if you said 8 hours, you'd say a third of your life, at work. So better than a third of your life, maybe 40%. So it should be something that, that you enjoy doing, that you're comfortable at, that the people around you, stand by you and you would stand by them. So I think finding a good fit is important.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that note. And I think this is important to, spend even an hour of your life. It's so precious and it's so worth it.
Yeah. I'm very proud of you, Pranali, too. What you're doing here is wonderful. And it's, to stretch yourself. And, I know you got a young family, so taking something like this on, I'm sure was, not an easy decision. And, just the exploration of it is very, very nice, very valuable for your life.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, that kindness, or for touching me all the times whenever we meet, whenever we talk. I think you have done that all the times to, most of us. That's where people are still in your touch, whether they are in LA, whether they are in Bay Area or anywhere.
Yeah, say hi to everybody for me too.
Uh, Thank you, Tina, for taking out your precious time and coming onto this show and advising a lot of our viewers in many different aspects, especially for the women who want to stay in the workforce. It was very important key points that you just listed, and we would always look upon or dive into when we are making the career decisions. It was helpful for me. I'm sure it was very helpful for all the viewers who are watching this show. If you like to stay, get more updates on this show and want to see more guests appearing so promptly, please subscribe to Women's Special Express Show. Thank you.
I let go of my claim on you. It's a free world. You look down on where you came from.